Eamon Khan here for Seconds Out with the Daily Mail's Jeff Powell MBE.
Want to get your thoughts in the main on the big heavyweight fight that's happening in Wembley shortly. That is the former heavyweight champion, unified heavyweight champion of the world, Anthony Joshua, finding himself as the veteran and the challenger to Daniel Dubois' IBF championship status at Wembley. Just your thoughts on that fight as a whole.
It's interesting at the point in the career of each of them, who would have the advantage. Obviously, youth is with Daniel, but whether he's yet developed to the point where he can deal with AJ if AJ decides to go for him is interesting. The other question is AJ really back on the road after a couple of better results and better performances, or is he treading water? The state of the pair of them, the point in their career in which they're at, makes it quite an intriguing fight. It could be he who lands first lands hardest. I'm wondering whether they will really go for it against a heavy puncher. I'm wondering where Daniel will be with probably the heaviest puncher he's faced. It'll be interesting. I mean, Daniel took a lot of big shots from Hrgovic, and whether he could take the amount of punishment like that from Joshua, I'm not so sure. It's an intriguing fight. Like all we love domestic fights in this country. And I think they'll fill Wembley. It won't do much TV in the United States, which again plays into the fiscal equation. But if they sell out Wembley and get good box office here, then I guess the numbers will add up for both of them. That must have been considered. But you've also got the Saudi Arabian money invested in that fight. So financially, it's covered. It's an interesting veteran against rising star context to the fight.
Do you concur with? I had a conversation with Thomas Hauser and also Duke McKenzie, MBE, and he said, "Look, both of them said off the back of Alexander Usyk winning undisputed status and having to vacate his title here, that Daniel Dubois and of course the winner of that fight has a paper championship status, so they're not a true champion because of Usyk winning the undisputed titles and having to vacate."
It's never quite the same to win a title by promotion and elevation because of political circumstances, and Daniel was clear about that. He said he would have preferred to win it in the ring, but I think this is his chance to do so, and for Joshua, it will be his chance to win another title in the ring. We've had a lot of split titles before. Usyk will still be considered the preeminent world champion, but we've had, with the divisions of so many alphabet bodies, we've had this situation before. We didn't shy away from suggesting that Tyson Fury wasn't a proper heavyweight champion because he only had the WBC belt. And I think that's a rather churlish attitude. It's not the first time the title's been won outside the ring. The almighty Lennox Lewis did it when Riddick Bowe chose to fight him. Nobody suggested that he wasn't a proper champion because there were other champions around. So no, I don't agree with that. I think if it's one of the titles on the line, then it's one of the titles on the line that's being fought for in the ring. The winner of that will have as much claim as any of the predecessors in this kind of firmament. No, I think I wouldn't belittle two big heavyweights going for it. But of course, Usyk will remain the man to beat. Now, whether or not the winner of this fight will go on to fight Usyk, is questionable. Certainly, it will take time. And of course, that would be the only way we could get back to having the undisputed champion. And we all think we'd like to have undisputed champions. And it became even increasingly difficult when the WBO became more of a status and something of a paper crown in Herbie Hines' day, but is now taken seriously. So, you have this pressure for mandatory titles all the time because the ruling bodies want to get their money, their sanctioning fees. There is a movement by His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh with the Saudi money and the Riyadh season to take over from the alpha belt bodies. There is a feeling that they're going to try to set them up through a boxing league as the only recognized entity. Although whether he'll get away with that, given what is so much at stake financially for the promoters and the other organisations, is questionable. We would all like to see one champion in each division. It would simplify the game, but it wouldn't generate the same cash. No, I don't think it's a paper title. I think it's one of many occasions when this has happened, and I don't think this is any worse than the others.
Daniel Dubois, being a heavy hitter that he is, AJ's resistance has come into question recently. Having seen fighters come and go in your time, how highly do you rate Anthony Joshua's punch resistance with Dubois in the corner and the explosiveness he brings?
I say he who lands first lands fastest, hardest. I think if Daniel Dubois manages to connect early on with AJ, then AJ's got a problem. When you think about the squat little Mexican, was not considered to be one of the heaviest punchers in the world or in the heavyweight game. Bob Arum actually let him go from his stable because he didn't think that he had the punching power, and yet he did for AJ. Whether that was a question of will or weakness of the chin, but perhaps Dubois can help us find out at Wembley. Whether his punch resistance has gone that much, I think we're going to find out that at least when the two of them meet.
Did you see the interaction between Dubois and AJ in that face-off? It seemed like a bit of a throwaway comment from Dubois saying, "Let's go now," but AJ took that as real disrespect and looked to challenge Dubois at that moment. From a veteran who is the challenger at this point for that younger fighter, is that what you wanted to see from Joshua, who's had claims about his desire to continue in the ring? Is that what you want to see AJ like rise to Dubois' perceived challenge?
I was surprised by AJ's attitude in that. I was surprised that he sort of threatened to pick up a chair. I don't think it was a stunt manufactured to develop interest in the fight. The interest of the fight is there naturally, and that sort of kind of confrontation is not going to drum up big business in the United States. They see that over there all the time. So I was surprised that AJ went for that. Perhaps it suggests a certain nervousness, which has been suggested elsewhere. If he's on edge, is that good or bad? Sometimes you have to be on edge to do your best to maximize your performance. But I was surprised that AJ got involved in that, yes.
Were you surprised by the back and forth between himself and Carl Froch, who seemed to have some sort of problem between each other? And I just wonder, do you feel that maybe stems from Carl Froch's loyalty to Robert McCracken, who AJ obviously left to try other coaches?
Well, certainly Carl is loyal to McCracken. He believes that AJ made a mistake in leaving him. And there's, you might say there's some evidence to support that. Everything was fine until AJ changed his trainer. And so, yes, I think there's a percentage of that, but I don't think it would have clouded Carl's judgment. Carl is an agent provocateur on the blog wave. He does say exactly what he thinks, which in itself is something of a rarity in all walks of life, starting with politics and the tragedy we're looking at, or the near tragedy we're looking at this morning. No, I think Carl just talks from the hip. he says what he thinks, and he says it without being concerned as to what criticism of another fighter might generate some animosity. I think he tells what he believes to be the truth, and I don't think it's rooted in loyalties or dislike. I don't think he particularly dislikes any of the people he criticizes, but he's prepared to swing away and say it as he sees it.
Tyson Fury, look, everything seemed to have gone radio silent, which I guess is probably a good sign. After the back of a few weeks ago, we saw that leaked footage of him crawling out of the pub, which a lot of people had concern for, contextualizing his past and how it went off the rails a few years ago. But are you at all concerned with Fury heading into the rematch with Usyk later this year off the back of those images? And were those concerns allayed after Fury sent out a statement kind of saying, look, I'm fine, it was just a one-off and I'm good to go?
My only concern is that rather than punch resistance, it appears that Tyson's drink resistance has gone. It's not as big as it was. He's gone from necking down the Jägermeisters at various events, including football matches, and apparently a few beers in his local pub knocked him over. But I think that happens to a lot of people when they reach a greater age. I'm glad to say it hasn't happened to me yet, but that was most surprising that his drink resistance had gone. His punch resistance, well, his punch resistance held up in the last couple of fights, even though they weren't his best performances. His punch resistance held up against Usyk when he was being battered around in the 9th round. He still got through it, perhaps with a bit of help from the standing 8 count from the referee. He took some huge blows from our friend Nagano, the crossover UFC king, and he withstood those, even though it made the fight difficult for him. Once again in that fight, he showed his capacity for recovery, of his ability to get up after being knocked down. Is one of the phenomenons of his career. So I don't think his punch resistance has gone. By way of preparation, did he ever drink before fights before? He tells you that sometimes he drinks the night before, and I'm not always inclined to disbelieve him. He is a one-off. He's a true character, and it's a long way till December. Perhaps that incident has made him knuckle down a bit, and perhaps the lovely Paris has marked his card, which he does occasionally. This wonderful lady of his. So yes, I don't think he's impaired physically. The question as to whether he can deal with Usyk again is another matter. There's a possibility that Usyk has his number now, and I'm more concerned with the fact that he sounds a bit delusional about the outcome. Personally, I scored the fight a draw, right? But it was a close fight. We don't object to the outcome, whichever way it goes when it's that close. But he seemed to think he'd won the fight comfortably. I think he needs to focus on the fact that he, retrospectively, I would say, I think Usyk deserved to win the fight because of the way he went about his business in a highly professional manner, while Tyson was performing a bit. Yes, I think overall he deserved to win the fight, even though I scored it a draw. But Tyson needs to realize it was at least very, very close. And he certainly didn't win it by the kind of margin he's imagining. I think he needs to get his head around that. He'll come in sufficient shape by his standards. And I think his chin will be there to take a few more blows that will be coming his way.
Appreciate that conclusive answer. Very lastly from myself, this is a developing situation which has seen Ryan Garcia make some very, very derogatory comments over social media, since apologized and since said he's going to check himself into rehab. He had problems for a long spanning time, and even had a break from boxing because of mental health issues. But I wonder, again, in your time, Jeff, in boxing, have you seen anything similar? And what's the path to recovery for Ryan should he look to continue in boxing after his ban, which is also perceived as a a short time, considering having been found to have Austrian in the system.
Well, he's gone into rehab, hasn't he now, which is the right thing for him to do. He's expressed remorse for something which I think was of the greater concern, was his threats to his ex-wife and his destructive rampage through their house. I found that pretty alarming. The build-up to his last fight, I think he was performing to a large extent, but what's happened subsequently, he hasn't dealt with the drug situation very well. I think he's got himself into a bad place with regards to his mental health, for which I think we should all feel some compassion for him, sympathy. The fact that he's gone into rehab, I hope, sorts him out. The mental agitation we saw from him didn't affect his last fight. He did a great job on Haney, thank you very much. But there was the weight issue, which kind of took away a bit of his self-esteem he gathered from that fight, and subsequently there's been the drugs issue. He needs to sort himself out. I think probably he's not a permanent drugs taker, but the circumstances, I think if there wasn't a mental health issue, he might have got a longer suspension. Perhaps the hope there is that 1 year will enable him to straighten himself up. But if he just decides to go on the rampage as a rather seemingly crazed celebrity, then he won't get to grips with himself. He's certainly capable of getting to grips with pretty well anyone he gets in the ring with at his weight. But whether he can get to grips with himself mentally is the main issue. And I would say let's hope he does. Not just for the sake of boxing, because he's a serious performer in the current circus of the great game we love, but because he needs to do so for his personal well-being.